So I'm Greg Malcolm, amateur Simon Pegg impersonator, and also a full-time consultant at ICC, a local consulting firm in town. If you have any questions for me, you probably know the drill by now. Just send it to the orange Slack channel, and we'll take questions at the end. Today's talk is also brought to you by Wacky Wanda's Wicked Weapons, putting the whack back in Wacky. Due to a shortage of time, I'm also going to be working on fixing this website while doing the presentation. I hope you don't mind. So therefore, I'll probably need to give you a quick rundown of what we got. So this is our new storefront. It sells venturing weaponry. It mostly works. For example, we can search for, say, swords. Helps if I maybe do that in the singular. There we go, nice array of swords. Anyone in the market for a sword, or for a weapon, sorry? You want a sword? Okay. Add that to the list. And we want a hammer, maybe? Now, as I mentioned, it doesn't work quite right, so yeah, see? That's a pretty dubious looking hammer. I suppose you could just grab the fingers and go whack, whack, but yeah, good luck with that. Also, yeah, some of the functionality is a bit off. If I try to go to the next page, this happens. So it's a work in progress, as you can see. As I'm going to be talking about, as we're going to need to be fixing during this presentation, I should give you just a quick rundown of the architecture. It's not super important that you understand this in depth, but I want to give you an overview just so you're not completely lost. So this whole thing's written in JavaScript, in particular ES6. It's pretty bare bones, but we are using Webpack, so we can reduce it down to one JavaScript file and one CSS file. It's shaped kind of in a MVC fashion, but it's very old school. For example, any events have to be registered in the view. There's no event binding, as we see in modern SPAs. But this thing is an SPA, so we've bolted a kind of router to the front of it very crudely that will at least allow you to have a RESTful URL in the address bar. So call this monstrosity Wanda MVC. Now, I don't recommend doing anything like this at home. Ordinarily, I would stick with Angular, React, Vue, or whatever the latest framework flavor is, but today I wanted to keep it framework agnostic because it kind of suits the presentation purpose. And of course, this is all about learning Chrome DevTool tricks. So we're going to start by looking at problems which will need the device toolbar. We'll then move on to solving some style sheet issues in the elements pane. Next up, we'll do some analysis using the console. We'll use the sources panel to do some debugging and development. And finally, we'll finish up in a networking pane where we'll look at some AJAX and some performance issues. Oh, hang on a second. Wanda's calling. Oh dear. Okay, I'll read it out to you. Minion! I just checked the site on my iPad. It looks terrible! Everything is too wide. Fix it immediately. Okay, I'll better get on with that. This is the issue. She just tried out the iPad flavor, and it's supposed to give you two tiles side by side like this, but in practice, we ended up with something more like that. It's like one all the way wide. It's like someone just took a piece of paper, took a typewriter, and stuck a picture on it. Not pretty at all. So let's see. If I look at the weapons page now. Going to need to bring up the developer tools. So I'll just do right-click inspect. There we are. Now, as this is a mobile issue, I'm going to use the device toolbar on the left here. Let's click on that. So it looks okay so far, but she said the problem was with the iPad favor. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's pretty gnarly. Let's have a look at what happens if in responsive mode. So I'll just select up there, and yeah, it looks like it starts off okay, then gets too wide, and eventually starts behaving as we'd expect. So probably an issue with the media queries, I think. Now, right at the top here, we do have a kind of breakdown of standard mobile sizing, but that's not really taking account our own CSS. So what I can do is in this menu up here, I can select Show Media Queries. And now what we get to see is a list of media query breaks based on what's actually in our CSS. So if I switch back to the iPad, it looks like the problem is somewhere in this dark brown section, in particular for min width of 673 pixels. If I right-click it, I should be able to find where the CSS is. Only I don't think that's any of those. I'll just try to the left a bit. There we go, it's showing a few more options there. I believe it's under weapons.css. That's a little bit hard to read there. I'm just going to cheat a little bit and switch to Atom for that. Okay, so that was in weapons CSS, I believe. There we go. Now the way this file is laid out, it starts off in mobile sizing and uses progressive media queries to handle all the increases in size. So if I keep scrolling, eventually we'll start seeing, media query breaks. So first off, we've got one here for min width of 451 pixels, 673 pixels, 973, and so on. And it's using a flex grid, so what it's doing is it's just setting the minimum width according to how many tiles we want. So for a mobile sizing, 100% gives you one tile. Eventually we get down to 2, which needs 50%, 50% 2 items, and 33 for free. You get the idea. So I think our issue is somewhere in this region. Can anyone see what's wrong? No units. Oh, thank you, sir. Could it be that easy? I'll just save that and refresh. Whoa, that's it. Okay, that was a nice low ball. So a quick retrospective on this. Mostly it came down to we used the device toolbar to help us out with the device issues. And I think no things probably surprising in there was I used the menu option show and hide media queries over here. So moving on to the next thing. So this is more of a feature. Wanda thinks we can attract more people to our website if we make a head spin. Yeah, really. I'll show you what I mean. So if I just turn off this device toolbar, because this is a website problem, she's of the opinion that visitors are going to feel more comforted if, as the mouse hovers over her head, her face just pops up, spins in the air in greeting, and returns. I think it's creepy, but it's what she wants. So for this, we're going to be using the Elements panel. If I right-click on her face itself, it's going to take us straight to the element that we're going to be looking at. Just to give you a quick rundown of what we're going to be working with here. Probably the most important part down here is when we select that, we can see the styles down below. Just going to move that right to left a bit. There we go. So for each of the styles in play, they're listed. For any of these styles that are kicking in, we can actually see which style sheet is responsible, which we can click on to view. On the right side here, we have the computed style. Sometimes that will show up in the tabs, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on how it's tiling at the time. Got some useful functionality here to show you how the spacing's working. So for example, if I hover over margin, you can see it's kind of beige next to a head, which kind of implies an auto style, which is filling up all the space. And sure enough, there we go, auto style. Finally, down below that, the actual computed styles, what's doing here is it's showing you which styles won out and what the competition was. So for example, if I look at font family, we had a body style for Helvetica, which wasn't very specific, but the one for a class called header upper header actually won out and gave us the Papyrus style. So back to the problem in hand. We need to look at the hover state for this. Fortunately, this is just showing us a static state. So what we're going to need to do is, by the way, before I get too far, can everyone see this okay? Excellent. If I click on the HOV button here, we can actually change which state we're pinned to. So I can actually click on hover here, and it'll act like my mouse is hovering over her face. And we see an instant change there. This is interesting. What's this over here? By the looks of it, we already have something in place. We've got this animation line, and apparently it's trying to do a somersault animation, but it's crossed out. So I'm going to find out what that's about. I'm just going to click on head spin here. And it looks like one of our developer gnomes actually started working on this feature, but commented it out because presumably it wasn't ready for production yet, which is interesting. Whoops. So if that's the case, I wonder if I can just turn it on with this checkbox. I can. Fortunately, that's not, yeah, it definitely isn't ready for production. You see it just jump out there, pretty ugly. I think the problem is it's going too fast. So I think what we're probably going to need to do is make use of the animations drawer to change the timing on that. So drawers are up here at the bottom of the page when you press escape. See that toggle down here? Like so. You're probably all familiar with the console drawer, but there's a whole bunch of these available, and one of these is the animations drawer. So when you have the animations drawer available, any animations that happen will show up in this timeline. So if I just hover my mouse over all these buttons, we're going to get some button animations, and we can see them displayed like this. Also, if we click it, it will take us to where the element is and show us some details. So we don't care about any of these guys. What we care about is our face hover. So if I just trigger that again, there we go. We got the somersault animation available. So we should be able to just directly alter this. So if so what do you reckon? It's doing 200 milliseconds. I think maybe something bigger, 650 maybe. Let's give that well. I'll just press this play button here to see that again. Yeah, it's more like it. Not quite right though, is it? It's kind of lumpy. I think the issue here is it's a keyframe animation, and these two parts don't gel together very well. So if we look at the definition here, it's doing an ease in, ease out, and maybe that's not suitable for this. But one nice thing about it is many of these styles have their own little editors attached, and this one has the cubic Bezier editor. So if I click on that, I can have a play with different styles. I don't think I want any of these though. I think probably what I want is something where you can't see the change occurring. So if I just make that flat, let's give that a go. There we go. That's looking smoother. So I just need to get that into the code now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select that. Oh, try that again. There we are. So I believe we're in headspin.css. There we are. I'll just clean that up a little bit. I think we probably want, I'll just round that to 650 milliseconds. And this cubic Bezier thing here, I think we can just replace that with a linear, because I now realize that's just a linear animation. Also, if anyone's interested, we can actually see the keyframe animation down below. And what it seems to be doing, it starts off at the origin point. Then 50%, it's just increasing the Y position 20 pixels, turning itself halfway and doubling the scale. And then the final stage, it just puts everything back and finishes the rotation off. All right, let's see that if that works. There we go. I'm sure the customers will be just running over them each other to get to this website now. So what's the big takeaway on this one? I guess key thing is this hover state's kind of useful. And we can play around with the animations in the animation drawer and also watch out for the editors in the styles. Okay. It's like the next phase, we're actually moving on to implementing a feature in the website. But first off, we've got to do some research. So we're looking at the animated weapons feature. What they want to do for this site is they want to add a checkbox to each of these tiles so we can enchant weapons. So when you check it, it will give us a nice blue hue. The prices would change, the weight would change. Should be good. The only problem is, say one of our developer named Jasper, he actually started work on this, but there was a really unfortunate workplace accident. He was accidentally eaten by a Balrog from the accounts department. We keep explaining to Trevor that developers are friends, not food, but he hasn't got the memo on this yet. It's work in progress. So what we need to do is have a look at the app and figure out how far Jasper got with building the enchanted modeling. And we'll do that from the console. And so what we're going to do for this little practice run is we're going to try enchanting Mjolnir. I'll bring that one up in a moment. So first off, one nice thing about having a really simplistic MVC is I do at least have one advantage, and that's it's really easy to put all the MVC parts on the main app object. So if I look at our app, we have a router, pages, views, controllers, and models, and it's the model we care about right now. So if I look at models, we have weapons or the cart. I think we want the weapons. There we go. I think we're getting closer. Apparently there's 25 of these items, which probably corresponds with the ones we loaded up on the page. Let's take a look at that. Oops. There we go. And yeah, so we can see them, but it's not very easy to read, is it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try docking it on the bottom and see if that's clearer. It's a little clearer, but I think we can still do better. Now, you're probably all familiar with console.log, which will print stuff. But there's also a console.table, which will allow you to show stuff in a tabular form. Like so. So if we apply that to our table, that's more like it. That's way easier to read. I think I want to zero down on one specific model, so I'm just going to pull down the first one, so item 0. There we go. So looking at this item, it looks like we've got some properties on that. So we've got an ID, a name, a category, a subcategory, cost, damage, range, weight, image URL, and enchanted. Enchanted. Okay, let's take a look at that. And yep, property is false. Okay, this might be easy. Now we still need to pull out Mjolnir to work on it, so that'll probably be easier if I just move this docking to the back to where it came from. Now I could do it from the menu, but there's a nice convenient way to do this. If you ever do Command-Shift-D, it will actually toggle between your last two dock positions. Control-Shift-D if you're on Windows. So now we can see the tiles easily. Just clear that down. And we need to be looking for mole near. There we go. Apparently we seem to have two candidates. Cheap mole near knockoff. Only 3 silver pieces. Sounds like a bargain. But you can tell the real mole near because it's extremely expensive and weighs 8,000 pounds. Wow. So if we had jQuery, we could just use that to select this item, I think, because it's probably a list item, I'm guessing. But the problem is we don't have jQuery. No matter. Chrome actually comes with its own version of that. It will select something, but it will only select the first item. Now, the first list item is in the nav bar, so that's not much good. That's okay, though, because if we do $, now we can see everything. Wonderful. That's the one we want. Now, if I click on that, that will actually go straight to the elements pane with it, and we'll still be able to access our console by pressing escape and accessing it from the drawer. Now, something interesting I saw a moment ago. Ah, yes. Where'd it go? There we are. See on the right of our selection, equals equals $0. You've seen that before? What does that mean? Well, yeah, anything you select is now available in this $0 variable. You can even access older selections with $1, $2, but I have absolutely no idea why anyone would ever want to do that. So, should be able to assign a weapon to that. Yep. Wonderful. Now, according to this, it's got the ID of 144, so that should give us the means to pull that from the model itself. So if I remember correctly, our models was in apps, models, weapons, and hopefully there's some kind of way to look up items in the collection here. Find, yeah, there we go. I just typed find, it gives me the method definition here. It looks like it takes an ID and does a lookup using find internally. That sounds good. So it should be find of 144 to match what we just saw. There we have it. The only problem is we didn't assign it to a variable. Not a problem. If I do var weapon equals $_, that will give us the last last expression evaluated, which was the hammer. Splendid. So now we have that, we should be able to enchant it, I believe. Oh, look at that. It's imbued. Wonderful. So, yeah, Jasper pretty much did everything. Good on you, Jasper. Well, that takes us to phase 2. We now need to make this available in the web app. So there's going to be 3 phases to developing it. First, we need to change our HTML template so we have a checkbox. When that's done, we're going to need to update the view so it actually responds to the event for the checkbox being clicked on. And finally, we're going to need to delegate the work to the controller to actually update the model. So for this part, we'll be using the sources panel. Before I get into that, let's take a look at what we have available. So over on the left here, we have the navigator pane. It's got lots of goodies. First off, in network, you've probably all seen this. It will show you all the files downloaded. Now, because I'm using Webpack, it's giving me extra information. It's broken up a bit. So in the localhost area, it's just giving us the raw files that we're serving up. So it's one style sheet, one bundle file. But in practice, we've actually got a lot more of that in our repository. So it's actually using something called source maps, which will connect each of our files up and say where each piece of code, line of code came from. So this is handy to have set up because that means Chrome knows exactly where to look which means when we're in elements earlier, it knew which CSS file was which because it's looking in the source maps. Next up, filing system. So this is the feature I think the Chrome developer tools people call workspaces. You can actually tell it where your code is and in theory do all your work completely from Chrome. No editor needed. To show what I mean, I'll click on plus and tell it where my JavaScript and CSS is. Select there. And I have to give it permission, so I'll just say allow. So at this point, I can just make changes to the code in Chrome and it will update straight away. Now there is a caveat to this. If you're using source maps like I am, there's some limitations. Firstly, it doesn't seem to work with styles. So if I'm in elements, anything I change here isn't going to persist. Secondly, probably more importantly, I've found at the moment it does tend to mess with breakpoints. So I'm going to turn it on while we work on the template part, but I'm actually going to turn it off again after that. I expect at some point the Chrome team will probably get past that, but that's how it is at the moment. Next up in overrides, this is really similar. This is a new feature. What you can do, instead of actually having it saved to your source, you can just designate a folder and say, I want to persist changes, but not to my source code. So that way you can try things out, refresh the browser, and still see it afterwards without losing everything. I'm not going to do any content scripts today. Snippets, the last one in this list. This one's straightforward. It's basically a bunch of JavaScript macros. For example, if I take hi, I'm a snippet here, and run that, it's going to print this highlighted line of in the console. And all it's doing is it's doing a console.log, but it's using %c, which tells it to inject a style sheet from the second argument. So the nice thing here is you can have these snippets and they'll just work across all your applications. Next up, let's have a look at the bottom area. So we've got the usual array of debugging features. I'm going to wait till we actually do some debugging before I actually talk about that more. We've also got the kind of breakpoints that you usually expect, but we've got some really interesting ones here. We've got Ajax breakpoints. We'll see that in action later. Also, DOM breakpoints. Yeah, that means you can go into elements, pick an element where you're interested in state change, like maybe it keeps disappearing, or you want to know what happens when it changes. Basically, if you tell it to break on a specific change, it will take you to the code that caused that change. So it can be handy if you're trying to figure out how something's happening. So finally, in the center area, our code section. If we close down all our code, fortunately, I seem to have quite a few things open right now. There we go. It actually has some really useful instructions right in the middle there. $P, open file. To do that, it gives me a fuzzy find searcher. And we're going to need to look at templates, I believe. So templates, result, HTML. Now you notice we've got two sets appearing here. We've got Webpack 1, which is the original source code. Sorry, this is the source mapped version of it. And then we've got the SRC version, which is the one which, if we change, will actually persist. So this is caused by us actually turning on workspaces. So we actually want these changes to happen live. So I'm going to select this guy here. There's also some nice other things hiding here. If I press question mark, we have snippets. We can actually run those snippets we looked at earlier from here. So I can just say, give me weapons, and it will run it. Notice here it's run that weapons, but it's not assigned to any variable. But that's OK, because we can just say var weapons equals $_, and of course that will give us the last evaluated expression. Last but not least, if you do Control-Shift-P, you can actually run any of the features available in the developer tools. This is particularly handy, I find, if you forget where something is. I used to keep forgetting where search in files is, but if I just type search, it suddenly becomes really obvious. Click on that guy, turns out it's a drawer. So I can now just say search in files and enchant, and it will look through all my deployed files and show me every place it exists. Now it'll be a lot slower on an actual live server, but it's pretty quick on my local version. So to the code. Let's actually do something. So what I'm using here is an ES6 multi-line string using backticks. This will work in TypeScript as well. One nice thing about this way of doing things is interpolated values is very handy. Not only can you put values in there, but you can put full-on ternaries. So it works pretty well as a standalone templating engine, really. And so what I need to do is add a checkbox. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I really do not want to live code a checkbox. So what do you reckon? Where should I stick this checkbox? Top, bottom? I'm thinking top. Save that. Now you notice, the moment I did, what I did there is I did $S and that saved it. And as soon as I did that, the page reloaded. The reason that happened is because, well, firstly, it persisted to file, and secondly, Webpack has got hot loading turned on, so it just saw the change and immediately loaded my difference, loaded the change. Of course, it doesn't work at all yet, but I've probably glossed over one detail as well. When I was changing the file, we had this little star up here. When I saved it, that went away. That's how you know it's actually worked. So $S or Control-S if you're on Windows. Okay, that was the easy part. I'm going to go ahead and turn off workspaces right away now because otherwise that'll make the debugging part hard. So where were you? File system. I'll just right-click here. Remove folder from workspace. Goodbye workspaces, I hardly knew you. So now we're going to actually have to use an editor to make further changes. So I believe the next thing you needed was the view. So view, weapon, there we go. Now somewhere I need to look for somewhere where they're registering events. This looks like the place. Now the functionality for enchant I think is going to be kind of similar to the buy button in that they're both sort of buttons, but the checkbox obviously has state as well. I'm going to switch to Atom to actually make the change here. So let's see, I can actually do the same trick here because Command P is becoming a popular way to do fuzzy finding in editors. So let's see, that was in View Weapon. There we go. And we were over here. Okay, so I'm just going to start by copying and pasting because everyone loves copy and paste code, right? Solid practice. Now I think it's called Enchanted Checkbox. I may have that wrong, but we'll find out in a moment. What we need to do is retrieve the ID from the parent element, because we saw earlier the ID is stored in the list item. And we don't want to buy, we want to enchant. Now what we don't have at the moment is something dealing with the state, but I think we can figure that one out from the debugger itself. So I'll just save that. And of course, because hot loading is in operation, it immediately appeared in my editor like so. So I'm just going to stick a breakpoint in here by clicking the margin and seeing if that takes. So if I click on Molnir, nope, I got that wrong. Enchanted checkbox. So, okay. Label. Enchantment checkbox. That was close. That's more like it. So I clicked on the checkbox and it hit the breakpoint. So time to break out the debugging tools. Most of these will be straightforward to many of you, I think. I'll just mention one or two things. The resume and continue button is obviously used to just run without stepping over every line. Now, one other use you have for this is you can also use it to pause the scripts. So if you've got menus flying out everywhere and you're trying to get it to stay still for a moment so you can inspect it, sometimes it's helpful to just click on this thing to stop it and get to it that way. Doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. Step over and step into is the features we're going to be using mostly to go through the code. Deactivate breakpoints is also kind of handy at times. Sometimes you have breakpoints everywhere and you just want to refresh the page. If you just click on that guy, refresh the page, and I'll keep hitting breakpoints every 5 minutes. So let's step into this line and find out how this works. So it's retrieving the ID. So step in, and it looks like it's trying to pull the list item from one of the parents. I'm going to just inspect that in the console. So I'll just run that line, step over, and it's the parent EL. There we go. So it's trying to pull it. Yeah, remember that earlier? It's trying to get to this data ID, but at the moment we've just got the parent. So next stage, it's going to pull the attribute. So I believe that will give us 144 when it runs this. I'll just check it down below in the console. There we go, 144. Yeah, that's good. So it makes sense so far. So we have indeed retrieved the ID. Next up, we need to enchant it in the controller. Oh, before we do that, though, we need to set the state. So the part I can never remember is the check state in the event E, or is it in e.target? I'll just use the console to figure that one out. So e.checked, would that work? Nope. e.target.checked. Bingo. I'll just add that to our implementation. So state equals e.target.checked. Oops. And let's add that to our non-existent enchant action, which we'll implement later. Wonderful. Let's give that a whirl. So this won't work at the moment, but it did work. So what happened is it looks like Jasper has already started work on this, but he didn't get very far with it. So he's actually added an enchant method to the controller action. The only thing is, though, there's nothing in there, and he's just put the debug keyword. Whenever you have the debug keyword in your editors, it will automatically work like a breakpoint. So this is very handy if you're working in Atom and you just want to hit this line, and you don't want to look around in your browser for it. If you just stick that in there, as long as the developer tools are open, it will treat that as a breakpoint. But you will likely break linting while that's going on if you have linting happening automatically. So let's have a look at implementing this as soon as we have it. So we were in the weapons controller, I believe. There we go. And debugger. Here we are. So again, I think functionality is going to be kind of similar to buy. So we need to retrieve the weapon based on the ID. So this .weapons.find. Whoops, wrong kind of find. And if we have a weapon, we need to, we saw this earlier, we need to take the weapon.enchanted, I think, equals, not true, but state. That look good? Let's see what happens. Refresh the page, give that a whirl. So I'm going to do F10 to step over, keyboard shortcut there. I think we know that what weapon.find does because we used it earlier. So if I step over that, yep, gives us a weapon. So far so good. Step over, yep, we have a weapon, and that should just work, I think. I think I'm going to go ahead and take the debugger line out and just see what happens. Gone. Refresh the page, and let's see if that works. Yes. So it's now a mere 3,000 gold pieces and weighs even more. So what do we get from that? What's the takeaway here? I guess we covered a lot of ground here, but probably the most useful keyword I probably used was debugger, if you ever need to set a breakpoint. Let's move on to the last section. So now we're up to the networking panel. Now you might be wondering, what does a half-dissolved adventurer in a gelatinous cube bouncing up and down have to do with networking? Because if you know, I'd love an answer, because you try to find a metaphor for Ajax if you can. I could not figure one out. So what we're going to be doing in network panel is solving two problems. Firstly, I've been told that the network performance isn't that good, so we're going to take a look at that. Also, remember at the beginning of the demo, I showed that the pagination does not work. That's probably an Ajax issue, so we'll look into that also. So, to the network panel. I'll just load up standard weapons there. Okay, let's clear away some of this debris. So first off, before I talk about anything else, disable cache. If you do not have this set in your network panel, do it immediately. Because if you're trying to debug and caching's kicking in, you know you're just going to have a bad time, right? And this will only apply when the console developer tools are open, so it's not an issue normally. So first off, let's look at the waterfall on this. Now, if I refresh the page, here we go. That's pretty quick. There's two interesting lines on this, and that's the blue line and the red line, and they're shown down below in the status here. So we have DOM content loaded of 110 milliseconds and load of 123 milliseconds. So what does that mean? DOM content loaded is the point where the main document has actually downloaded, but you're still downloading CSS and images and subframes. The red line, load, is when all those parts have downloaded as well. So the question is, which one is more important? And the answer depends on your website, really. The key thing is, when do the users think their page is up and running? Because the key detail here is, just to throw some random metrics down, if it takes less than a second, you're probably in the clear. The users are not likely to notice your page is loading. But if you take more than 5 seconds, anything beyond that, you're probably going to start losing visitors because they'll just get bored and maybe never come back. So it looks like we passed that with flying colors, except that wasn't a very good test. Firstly, I should be looking at mobile before I look at the main web, because that's probably where your timing problems are going to happen. So I'm just going to turn on the device toolbar again. But more importantly, this whole test was run using a local server. So yeah, of course that's going to be fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the right here and turn on throttling and make it simulate 3G. This time round, I don't think it's going to go quite so well. Let's have a look. And it's off. Still doing it, still loading. Over 5 seconds. 8 seconds later, we've got DOM content loaded. Still waiting on the full load. What do you reckon? It's going to take a minute, day, year? Yeah, how long's this session? Okay, I hope this doesn't take too long. Come on, you can do it. 24 seconds, abysmal. Okay, there's two issues that come to mind here. I'll state right now, performance is not my area of expertise, but I can still tell there's a couple of things are obviously wrong. One, we're loading all the images in one go. One obvious optimization is maybe just show what you need to load the page, because some of these could be lazy loaded. But more importantly, these images, quite frankly, I just downloaded them off the internet. I didn't look at the size or anything. We're showing them at like 200 by 200 pixels. These images vary wildly in size, so just simply being smarter about which images we use and which formats we use would probably make a world of difference here. But, like I said, performance is not really my area of interest, so I'm going to move on to the Ajax issue. Or I should probably also note that we've got this nice little yellow triangle here warning us that throttling is enabled, because obviously we're going to have a bad time until we turn that off. There we go. So to the Ajax issue. So remember from earlier, if I click on the next page, bad things happen. If I click on, so what I want to do is just look at the Ajax, nothing else. I'm going to just click on XHR there. And red, that's never a good thing, right? Let's take a look at that. So first off, it looks like it was trying to pull from an external API. So, probably not my fault. Yay. Next up, 500 internal server error. Yeah. Got lots of response headers, request headers. Right at the bottom here is where we're feeding it some query params in the string. That's this bit here. So have a look at the response we got on that. Now this isn't what I normally would expect. I expect more like standard JSON. This looks like a full-on error report. So either it's a development server we're hitting, or it's the world's lousiest production server. Let's go look at the page itself that it was trying to hit, because it was a get operation, so we should be able to just do that. And yeah, it looks like it was hitting a Rails server. Just make that a little bigger. There we go. Now, looking at that, even if you don't know Rails, I mean, one thing we can see here is it's looking at params, and then it's looking at the page in params, which is probably that guy there, and then the number, except there's no number. Hang on a moment. Oh, maybe it is my fault. Clearly we're sending it a bad query param. Okay, so now we need to find out where the code is that actually sent that across and fix it, I think. So I know of 2 ways to debug, to set breakpoints for Ajax. Now the more obvious way to do it would be from sources using the Ajax breakpoint feature I showed you earlier. Now the way this one works is you just tell it part of the URL and it will break every time it hits it. So that's pretty nifty. So let's see, if I go back to when it was breaking and I just tell it about the full thing. You don't have to give it the whole thing, but I've got it, so I might as well use it. So what should happen now is if I click on next, there we go, it hits the breakpoint. Now that's good and all, but there's a simpler way to do that I prefer using when I can. So I'll show you that as well. So earlier, I went straight to the details view on this, but if you don't use the details view, there's actually something else that's useful. Most of these table entries are kind of boring, except for initiator. If I hover over that, we get a full stack trace. Now, if I'm to go to the top one, I think that's where I think that's the one of interest. That takes us straight to the code, so I can just plot my own breakpoint on there. To me, it just seems a little bit simpler. There is one downside to this approach, of course, and that's it's going to hit the breakpoint more frequently now. But when I cause the problem, here we are, where we want to be. So all we've got to do now is just track down the problem. So it's doing fetch weapons Ajax, and see, starting by building the API params. That sounds relevant. So I'm going to step into it. See, so it's building a query array. The first thing it's doing is looking for the search parameters. I don't think we gave it any search parameters, so it doesn't care. Then it's looking at the page, and it's trying to push this string here. So if I just look at that in the console, using the console draw, page equals 2. Yeah, that looks like the offending place. So I think that should have been page number. Let's give that a look in the code. So that's weapons controller again. Here we are. I think all we have to do is say number, save that, and give that a whirl. Get rid of the breakpoint, and I think pagination is now working. Excellent. Yeah, job's a good one, as we say in England. Okay, so it's getting close to the end there. So in terms of resources, everything you saw up today is available in bit.ly/wickedweapons. I'll post that to the Slack channel after I'm finished. One thing, one useful link here is documentation on getting started. This is actually the easiest way to get to this actually is from Chrome Developer Tools itself. If you go to the system menu and look at the help, there's this item called documentation. And that takes you straight to the Chrome DevTools documentation. And this is a really good site. If you just look through there, it's just full of gems. That's pretty much how I did a lot of the research for this. And I think that's everything but the questions.
breakpoint to precompiled CSS
Oh.
if running locally.
So can I read that aloud?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, does the media query highlight in the device selector point to the pre-compiled CSS if running locally? If I understand the question correctly, it's taking me to, yeah, I guess by pre-compiled we mean the original version. So it should go to the version before it gets crushed down and minified and everything else if you have source maps turned on.
And I don't know if that, that was just some notes, I think, just some points there. Let's see, that's Chad Green. This one here, this in Chrome.
Ah.
I don't know if that's more of a question or a statement.
Oh, no, it's correct. Someone noted that in Chrome, by default, the dollar is alias to document.querySelector and $$ is alias to document.querySelector all. I think this is true, and I read this in the notes myself. The one thing I did notice a subtle difference between using it with $$ and actually doing document.querySelector all, but I'm sure it's correct.
Any more here? That one at the bottom.
If you use jQuery's $.ajax or any of the variants, keep in mind that the actual initiated code will be a couple results down on the initiator's cover. Yes, so that is true. When we pull down the stack trace, in this case, what we wanted was Straton on the top, but it will vary.
Okay. Any questions? Any other questions in the room?
Thank you.